A shattered radio intercept, the crackle drowned beneath static, hints at a moment lost to history. On the morning of October 24, 1944, the mighty Yamato-class battleship Musashi, pride of the Imperial Japanese Navy, was presumed invincible, a floating fortress with armor plating up to 410 millimeters thick. Yet, by nightfall, she lay crippled, sinking beneath the Philippine Sea. A grainy photograph from a U.S. Navy pilot, taken mere minutes before the final assault, reveals more than just smoke. Rising, shadows in the water suggest a terrifying vulnerability. How could a vessel designed to dominate the seas be obliterated in mere hours? What did the broken intercept miss that day? What secrets did the ocean swallow with the Musashi? The Musashi was not just a battleship. She was a symbol of Japan's naval ambition, conceived in the late 1930s amid rising tensions in the Pacific. Engineers at Mitsubishi worked tirelessly to embody Japan's doctrine of decisive surface engagement, a single battle to shatter the enemy fleet. The decision to build the Musashi was as much political as strategic, fueled by rivalry within the Navy and the desire to outmatch American battleships. A faded blueprint from the shipyard, annotated in hurried ink, reveals hurried compromises. Armor was layered thicker, but speed sacrificed. Was this a calculated gamble or hubris? Did internal conflicts blind Japan's naval planners to the shifting tides of warfare that made even the greatest battleship vulnerable? At 27,000 tons standard displacement, over 70,000 tons fully loaded, armed with 9 460mm guns, the largest ever mounted on a warship, the Musashi was a floating fortress. Yet her massive size became a liability. Her draft limited her maneuverability, and her speed maxed out at just over 27 knots, slower than many of the aircraft carriers and destroyers she was meant to protect. Air defense was reliant on dozens of 25mm anti-aircraft guns, yet these proved woefully inadequate against the relentless waves of American carrier-based planes. A schematic of her anti-aircraft battery shows dense clusters, but the reality was chaos under fire. How did such a formidable arsenal fail to protect her? Was it a failure of technology, tactics, or something deeper? The first real test came during the Battle of Leyte Gulf, when the Musashi was tasked with breaking through U.S. naval forces. On October 24th, aircraft from Task Force 38 launched a relentless assault. Over 300 bombers and torpedo planes converged. Despite withstanding dozens of hits, the ship's damage control teams were overwhelmed. Eyewitness accounts describe the stifling smell of burning fuel and scorched steel, the shrill alarms, the frantic commands echoing across the decks. A Japanese squadron commander's report mentions, "The ship seemed to bleed from every seam." How was it possible that the world's heaviest armor was pierced so thoroughly? Did the crews truly believe the Musashi was indestructible until that day? American tactics evolved rapidly after initial encounters with the Yamato class. Pilots coordinated attacks to saturate the ship's defenses, focusing on vulnerable points: engine rooms, ammunition magazines. The U.S. Navy introduced new bomb types, including armor-piercing and delayed fuse bombs, designed to inflict catastrophic internal damage. Intelligence intercepted by Japanese cryptographers hinted at these changes, but the warnings were fragmented and delayed. Musashi's retrofit plans, including additional anti-aircraft guns and radar upgrades, came too late. An instruction manual, smudged with grease and blood, found in a sunken destroyer, details hurried attempts to adapt. Why was the Japanese Navy unable to implement countermeasures swiftly? Did bureaucratic inertia doom the Musashi before battle even began? As the relentless attacks continued, Musashi's fate became inevitable. Fires raged uncontrollably, and flooding caused a deadly list. The ship's final radio message was garbled, interrupted, a haunting echo of confusion and despair. A strategic map from U.S. command shows the converging forces, a deadly net closing around the Japanese fleet. Resources to rescue or reinforce the Musashi were scarce. Fuel shortages and ongoing battles left her isolated. The loss was not just tactical, but symbolic. A blow to the faith in battleships as the ultimate naval weapon. What did this moment reveal about the future of naval warfare? Could the era of the battleship survive the age of air power? The sinking of the Musashi in a single day shattered illusions. The great battleship, once the heart of Japan's naval might, was now a tomb beneath the waves. The age of the battleship was over, supplanted by aircraft carriers, submarines, and air dominance. Each dive into the archives reveals fragments of a bygone era where steel giants ruled the seas until invisible enemies from the sky proved their Achilles heel. How many lessons were ignored in the rush to build bigger and stronger? The Musashi's story is a grim testament. Power without adaptation is doomed to fade, swallowed by the very tides it sought to command. Each episode is a document I pull from the dust of the archives. Share your own stories. Many of you have relatives who lived through that time, and your words help connect personal memory with archival evidence. Stay curious. Subscribe so you don't miss the next episode tomorrow. In the hours before the Battle of Leyte Gulf, the Musashi's crew was confident, bolstered by decades of tradition and the ship's imposing silhouette cutting through the morning mist. The decks, slick with sea spray, buzzed with activity. Sailors inspecting gun turrets, officers studying weathered charts under the dim glow of lanterns. Yet beneath this routine, a fragmented radio intercept hinted at an incoming assault force far larger than anticipated. The static-laden transmission abruptly ended mid-sentence. Enemy carriers. Detected. Multiple squaw. The incomplete message would never reach the Admiral's ear. How could such a critical warning vanish into the ether? Was this a mere technical failure or a symptom of deeper communication breakdowns within the command structure? The Musashi's placement within the fleet formation reflected the Navy's lingering faith in battleship supremacy. Positioned as the spearhead, she was intended to absorb the brunt of enemy fire, shielding more vulnerable vessels. Yet a faded photograph taken by a reconnaissance plane reveals an unsettling detail. The battleship's anti-aircraft guns were unmanned during a crucial window. Witnesses later recalled that many gunners had been repositioned to assist with damage control on other ships, leaving the Musashi exposed. Could this have been a calculated risk or a desperate improvisation born of inadequate manpower? Why did the High Command underestimate the threat posed by air attacks despite mounting evidence? At the heart of the Musashi's vulnerability was a design philosophy rooted in an earlier era. Though heavily armored, her armor scheme prioritized protection against shellfire rather than aerial bombs and torpedoes. A recently declassified engineering report reveals that the ship's magazines and fuel tanks were separated by thin bulkheads, a compromise intended to save weight. When torpedoes struck below the waterline, these weaknesses became fatal. Flames and explosions spread rapidly, turning the steel behemoth into an inferno. Did the engineers fail to anticipate the evolution of naval warfare? Was this oversight an unavoidable consequence of technological limits, or a fatal misjudgment? As the American air assault intensified, the Musashi became a target of unprecedented ferocity. Dive bombers and torpedo planes executed coordinated attacks, exploiting gaps in the ship's defenses. Radio logs from U.S. pilots described the eerie calm before the strike, an unsettling silence broken by the roar of engines and the clatter of bombs. Despite valiant efforts by the crew, damage control was overwhelmed by flooding and fires. The ship's list increased steadily, visible even in blurry reconnaissance imagery. How did the Musashi's command react as the situation deteriorated? Were there moments when hope seemed possible, or was defeat accepted as inevitable? The Japanese Naval Command's response to the Musashi's plight was hampered by fragmented intelligence and conflicting priorities. Orders to dispatch rescue forces were delayed, hampered by fuel shortages and the risk of further losses. An intercepted message from a fleet admiral shows terse frustration. Musashi must hold position. Reinforcements are unavailable. Meanwhile, American commanders adjusted tactics, focusing on relentless pressure rather than decisive blows. Was the Japanese leadership paralyzed by indecision or trapped by the harsh realities of a shrinking war effort? What role did internal politics and inter-service rivalries play in the failure to save the battleship? The sinking of the Musashi sent shockwaves through the Imperial Japanese Navy. The loss was not just physical, but psychological, a devastating blow to the doctrine that had placed battleships at the center of naval strategy. Official reports framed the disaster as a heroic last stand, but suppressed documents reveal sharp criticism of the ship's design and deployment. A fragment of a confidential memo reads, The era of the battleship has passed. Air power reigns supreme. This admission came too late to save the Musashi, but it marked a turning point in naval warfare philosophy. How did this realization reshape Japan's naval tactics in the final months of the war? Was the Musashi's fate a catalyst for change, or merely a tragic symbol of obsolescence? The final moments of the Musashi were captured in haunting detail by survivors' testimonies and underwater reconnaissance decades later. The ship's towering superstructure, once a beacon of power, now rests broken and silent on the ocean floor. Its twisted hull tells a story of overwhelming force and shattered illusions. The battle that claimed the Musashi was not just a tactical defeat, but the death knell of battleship dominance in the Pacific. In the cold depths, the ghost of the Musashi lingers, a reminder that even the mightiest can fall when the tides of war shift beneath their keels. What lessons remain buried with her, waiting to be uncovered? In the aftermath, the Imperial Japanese Navy grappled with the stark reality that their most formidable asset had been neutralized by air power alone. A grainy photo from a reconnaissance plane shows the Musashi listing heavily, engulfed in smoke, moments before she slipped beneath the waves. The image was a gut punch to Naval Command, whose faith in battleships as the ultimate arbiters of sea power was unshaken until that day. Behind closed doors, high-ranking officers convened in smoke-filled rooms, debating what the loss meant for Japan's naval future. Could the Navy adapt quickly enough to a war increasingly dominated by aircraft? Or was the Musashi's demise a harbinger of total strategic collapse? The decision to continue prioritizing battleship construction and deployment despite mounting evidence of vulnerability speaks to deep institutional inertia. Internal memos reveal a stubborn refusal to fully embrace the carrier-centric doctrine adopted by the U.S. Navy. Engineers and tacticians at Mitsubishi proposed retrofitting existing battleships with enhanced anti-aircraft capabilities and reinforced armor, but budget constraints and inter-service rivalries stalled these efforts. A hastily annotated blueprint shows added gun emplacements scrawled in the margins, never realized. Was this reluctance born of pride, tradition, or a fatal misreading of the evolving battlefield? Why did Japan cling so desperately to a model that had already proven obsolete? Meanwhile, American naval strategy evolved with ruthless efficiency. The success against the Musashi validated carrier strike groups as the new capital ships. Pilots trained relentlessly, perfecting attack formations and bomb types designed to exploit known weaknesses in battleship armor and compartmentalization. An intercepted training manual from a U.S. Navy squadron commander emphasizes precision targeting of engine rooms and magazines, the Achilles heels of the once indomitable battleships. Could Japan have countered this shift if it had acted sooner? Or was the relentless industrial and technological might of the Allies an insurmountable tide? The psychological impact on Japanese sailors was profound. Survivors' memoirs describe a haunting sense of vulnerability replacing former pride. The image of the Musashi, once a symbol of invincibility, sunk beneath the waves became a collective scar. A faded photograph of crew members in the months before the battle shows smiling faces, unaware of their impending fate. Did this loss erode morale across the fleet? How did it influence the willingness of sailors to engage in what increasingly felt like futile resistance? Was the faith in the battleship's protective power a shield that shattered as quickly as the ship itself? Strategically, the sinking forced a painful recalibration. Battleships were relegated to secondary roles, often tasked with escorting carriers or providing shore bombardment, tasks far removed from their intended purpose. Operational plans shifted, but too late and too little. Communications between fleet commanders reveal frustration and desperation as the balance of naval power tilted irrevocably toward the United States. How did this shift influence Japan's broader war strategy, especially in the face of dwindling resources and mounting losses? Did it accelerate plans for kamikaze tactics and desperate last stands? Even within the Imperial General Headquarters, the Musashi's loss was a turning point. Secret assessments, long hidden from public view, record the somber acknowledgement that battleships could no longer dictate the outcome of naval engagements. Yet these reports were overshadowed by political considerations and propaganda needs. The myth of the battleship's invulnerability was maintained in public discourse to preserve morale. What price was paid for this illusion? Could transparency have saved lives or altered Japan's strategic decisions? Or was the machinery of war already too entrenched in its fatal course? The Musashi's sinking was more than the loss of a ship. It was the collapse of an era. Its demise illuminated the brutal truth that technological and tactical evolution had outpaced tradition. The battleship, once the ultimate symbol of naval dominance, became a relic submerged beneath the shifting tides of modern warfare. As the Pacific War raged on, this lesson remained a silent echo, a warning etched in steel and fire, waiting to be understood by those who would face the next great conflict. What remnants of this truth continue to shape naval doctrine today? How do we reconcile the grandeur of the past with the unforgiving demands of the future? In the final analysis, the loss of the Musashi exposed a fatal flaw not merely in ship design, but in the entire strategic mindset of the Imperial Japanese Navy. The battleship, conceived in an age where line-of-battle tactics ruled, was ill-suited to the rapidly changing realities of World War II's Pacific theater. A recently uncovered war diary from a naval engineer reveals a haunting admission. Our greatest strength became our greatest weakness. The Musashi's overwhelming size and armor, once sources of pride, rendered her a slow, vulnerable target for agile carrier-based aircraft. Despite her legendary firepower, she was defenseless against the invisible threat from above. How did such a colossal symbol of power become an emblem of obsolescence within a single day? The ripple effects of Musashi's sinking reverberated throughout the Japanese Naval Command. Subsequent operations showed increased reliance on air power and submarine warfare, but these adjustments came too late to reverse the strategic tide. The Navy's remaining battleships, including her sister ship Yamato, met similar fates under overwhelming air assault. A classified report from the final months of the war bluntly states, "The battleship is no longer the decisive weapon. It is a liability." Yet the cultural and institutional attachment to the battleship persisted, delaying necessary reforms. Could a swifter pivot have altered the course of the Pacific War? Or was the industrial might and technological innovation of the Allies simply insurmountable? The Musashi's demise also had profound psychological consequences. Within the ranks, the myth of invincible battleships had been a cornerstone of morale. Its shattering forced a reckoning with the brutal truth of modern warfare, where speed, air superiority, and technological adaptability eclipsed sheer size and firepower. Veteran sailors recall a pervasive sense of disillusionment, a loss of identity tied to the sinking of their flagship. Photographs of survivors, faces etched with exhaustion and mourning, tell of a fleet grappling with the death of an era. How do such losses transform the spirit of a fighting force? Can tradition survive the ruthless demands of innovation? Looking back, the story of the Musashi embodies the twilight of the battleship age. It stands as a stark reminder that no weapon, no matter how formidable, is immune to the changing face of war. The ship's destruction demonstrated the ascendancy of air power and heralded a new paradigm in naval warfare, one where aircraft carriers, not battleships, ruled the oceans. Yet beneath this strategic shift lies a cautionary tale about adaptability, foresight, and the perils of clinging to outdated doctrines. What lessons did the world learn from Musashi's fate? How do these lessons resonate in today's rapidly evolving military landscape?